My father's voice cracked through the reception hall, sharp and amplified, slicing clean through the string quartet's final note. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Every eye turned toward him as he stood at the head table, microphone in one hand, something small and yellowed in the other. It was my grandfather's passbook. The leather was cracked with age, the pages inside swollen and fragile, the kind of thing you don't touch without reverence. He held it up between two fingers like it offended him. "I found this tucked away," he continued, smiling for the crowd. "Some people think old trash has value. But really?" He glanced down at me in my white dress, head tilted in theatrical pity. "Trash belongs with trash." Before I could move, before anyone could breathe, he stepped toward the champagne station and dropped the passbook straight into the silver bucket, where melting ice and pink champagne swallowed it whole. Laughter erupted. Not everyone, but enough. A roar of shocked amusement, nervous claps. Someone whistling like it was a show. Phones came out. Someone caught my expression and zoomed in. The ice water sloshed over the rim, splattering my skirt. Champagne stained the silk a faint blush. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't look at my new husband, Luke, even though I could feel him tense beside me, ready to step in instead. I moved, I lifted my skirt with one hand and plunged the other straight into the bucket. The cold was brutal, knife-sharp, instant. Ice burned my skin as my fingers scraped against glass and metal, finally closing around the soaked passbook. I pulled it out, water streaming from the pages, champagne dripping down my arm, soaking my bodice completely. A hush fell over the room. My dress was ruined. The delicate lace at the waist darkened, heavy with liquid. My hands shook, not from emotion, but from the cold. I cradled the passbook against my chest like something alive. Then I turned. I walked down the aisle alone, heels clicking against marble, water trailing behind me. I didn't look back at my father. I didn't acknowledge the whispers or the stunned faces or the phone still pointed at me. I just walked out of my own wedding reception. And if you've ever had a family member humiliate you at a celebration, your graduation, your birthday, your wedding, tell me in the comments. I want to know the cruelest thing someone ever did to you when you were supposed to be happy. Because this wasn't new. My name is Alyssa Mercer. I'm 29 years old. I work as a trauma nurse, which means I'm very good at staying calm while everything is bleeding. I'm very good at making myself invisible when it keeps the peace. I've been holding secrets since I was a child. That passbook wasn't a mistake, and my grandfather slipped it into my hands minutes before the ceremony. His grip surprisingly strong for a man everyone said was fading. He leaned in and whispered, "Don't let him touch this. You'll know when to use it." My father never knew my grandfather saw through him. He never knew those numbers inside the passbook weren't sentimental. They were a map. So I stood outside the venue, dress ruined, hands numb, guests murmuring behind the doors. I flipped open the swollen pages. Ink had bled, but the entries were still there. Dates, deposits, names that didn't belong. The foundation of my father's so-called empire. Built on lies. That night, he thought he'd broken me. Thought he'd reminded everyone who had power. But what he really did was hand me permission. And over the next few weeks, I would use what he tried to destroy to dismantle everything he built, quietly, legally, and in full public view. This was the moment it started. The moment he chose spectacle over love. The moment I chose not to stay invisible anymore. 3 days after my wedding imploded, I stood inside First National Bank, downtown Boston. The marble lobby whispered money. Polished floors, vaulted ceilings, voices lowered out of habit, not courtesy. Everyone here knew how to behave around wealth. I didn't look like I belonged. I wore a thrifted wool coat with a missing button and clutched a champagne-stained passbook sealed inside a crinkled Ziploc bag. It looked exactly like what my father had called it, trash. The yellowed leather was warped now, pages buckled from ice water and champagne. Ink blurred but still legible if you knew where to look. I stepped up to the counter and slid the bag across to a young teller. Maybe 20, hair in a tight bun, nails perfect. She picked it up with 2 fingers, her nose wrinkled. I recognized the look. The polite disgust people reserve for things they don't understand but assume are worthless. "I'd like to check the balance," I said quietly. "My name is Alyssa Mercer. I'm 29 years old. I'm a trauma nurse. My entire career is built on knowing how to disappear in chaos, how to take orders, absorb damage, and keep secrets that aren't mine. I know how to fade into the background so others feel important. Standing there, though, I felt exposed. Too visible. Like the marble walls were reflecting everything I tried to hide. The teller typed in the account number. She paused, her fingers hovered over the keys, she blinked. Leaned closer to the screen. Typed again, the color drained from her face so fast it startled me. "Ma'am," she whispered, voice suddenly tight. "Please wait right here. Do not leave." She stood so quickly her chair rolled back into another desk. People stared now. A minute later, a woman in a navy blazer appeared. Then a man in a bespoke gray suit I'd only ever seen on billboards near Logan Airport. They didn't look at my coat. They didn't look at the bag, they looked at me. "Miss Mercer," the man said, already holding out his hand. "I'm the regional director. Please follow us. Royalty in exile." They escorted me past a heavy steel door into a private viewing room. Thick glass. Sunproof. The air smelled like cold metal and old paper. I sat in a leather chair and closed my eyes as the vault mechanisms began to turn. The sound pulled me backward. I was 12 again, hardwood floors. My father's study. Richard Mercer lounged in his armchair, swirling scotch, watching the spill creep across the floor because he'd knocked the glass over on purpose. "Girls clean," he said mildly. "Boys conquer." My brother Hunter laughed from the sofa, controller in hand, feet planted on the freshly polished table. I scrubbed. "Missed a spot, Alyssa," Richard said softly, like encouragement. His cruelty always needed an audience. It was his theater, watching the light dim in my eyes. Grandpa Samuel tried to help me up, his hand trembling. "Touch that rag, old man," my father snapped, voice like a whip, "and I'll put you in a state home so fast you won't even have time to pack your pills." I scrubbed until my knuckles split. The vault door clanked. I was back. The director slid a document across the table. "This isn't a standard savings account," he said carefully. "It's a Totten Trust, established in 1982. My grandfather. Early investments," he continued. "Apple, Microsoft, dividends reinvested consistently. Untouched for 40 years. He turned the page. Current valuation, $12,400,000. $12,400,000. The number sat there. Black, clean, absolute. Legally payable to me upon my grandfather's death. I thought about the champagne bucket. About my father laughing, calling it trash. About how he'd held $12 million in his hands and thrown it away without even opening the cover. Too arrogant to look. "Is there anyone else listed on the account?" I asked. The director didn't hesitate. "No, just you. It's entirely yours." I touched the ruined passbook through the plastic. This wasn't just money, IT was a weapon. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where to aim it. That same night, the air in our apartment felt electrically charged. Like something fragile was about to shatter. Luke was hunched over his laptop at the kitchen island, shoulders tight, jaw set. Printed spreadsheets were spread around him in uneven stacks, forming a paper fortress that crept toward the sink. Highlighters, sticky notes, 3 empty coffee mugs. He didn't look up when I came into the room, hummed with quiet menace. "Luke isn't just a data analyst. He's a forensic architect of secrets, the kind of man who doesn't look at what people say they have, but at what their numbers are desperately trying to hide. He finds cracks in foundations no one else even knows to check." When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, controlled, almost clinical. "It's not an empire, Alyssa," he said. "It's a Ponzi scheme, built on bridge loans and ego." He turned the laptop toward me. I expected columns of wealth. Millions. The kind of numbers my father bragged about at charity galas and family dinners, swirling wine as he talked about vision and legacy. Instead, the screen bled red. Every account, every line item. Red numbers stacked on red numbers like open wounds. "Insolvent," Luke continued, tapping the screen. "Completely. He's been underwater for years." He clicked again. "The Newport mansion? Foreclosure proceedings started 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. While I was finalizing seating charts. While my father toasted to family at engagement dinners. Another file opened. The family trust, Luke said. Empty. Not low empty. It's been hollowed out. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. He zoomed in on a web of transfers. This is the shell game. Same $50,000 moved between 6 accounts, over and over. Just fast enough to fake liquidity. Slow enough to avoid immediate flags. Then the last file. The IRS audit notice arrived last month. Notice of deficiency. If they finish digging, he's looking at federal charges. The man who threw my grandfather's legacy into a champagne bucket wasn't a titan of industry. He was a drowning man, flailing in a sea of debt. He didn't want money for power. He needed it to stay out of prison. My phone rang. Dad, I answered without hesitation, no apology. No pause. Just the brash confidence of a man who still believed the world bent for him. I've been thinking about that little shack your grandfather left you, Richard said smoothly. The cottage. Not the passbook. Something else. I'm going to do you a favor, he continued. I've already spoken to a real estate attorney. I'll handle the sale, get you fair market price, and roll the proceeds into the family business where it can earn an actual return. Luke's eyes flicked to mine. You're a nurse, honey, my father added, almost kindly. You don't know the first thing about property taxes or maintenance. I'm trying to save you a headache. The cottage was worth maybe $300,000. Peanuts to a billionaire, a lifeline to a desperate fraudster. I'm not selling, Dad, I said, silence, then his voice dropped an octave. Your grandfather wasn't mentally competent near the end, he snarled. I've got witnesses ready to testify you manipulated a senile geriatric. I'll sue for elder abuse. I'll drag you through probate court until you're bankrupt. He exhaled sharply into the phone. You're out of your depth, Alyssa. That's when it clicked. He wasn't protecting me, he was hunting for anything he could seize, sell, and funnel into the black hole of his collapsing scheme. I understand perfectly, I said calmly, and ended the call. Luke wasn't scared. He was smiling, not warm, not amused. A cold, sharp smile that matched the feeling rising in my chest. He thinks he's bullying the same invisible daughter, Luke said quietly. He has no idea. He just handed us the blueprint. Desperate men always make mistakes. And my father had just made his biggest one yet. I waited 24 hours before I called him back. Silence is a powerful amplifier. It doesn't calm people, it lets desperation breed. I knew every hour without hearing from me would tighten the vice around my father's chest, pushing him closer to mistakes. Those hours weren't spent panicking. They were spent preparing. I didn't hire a lawyer to fight the cottage sale. That would have tipped my hand. Instead, I hired a graphic designer. Not a legal expert, not a financial advisor. Someone who understood how to make documents look authoritative without asking inconvenient questions. Investment portfolios. Performance summaries. Transfer packets. All fake. Every line designed to match the formatting my father already trusted. Same fonts. Same headers. Same sterile language that made theft look like strategy. By the time I picked up the phone, the trap was fully built. But the most important preparation wasn't on paper. IT was in me. I didn't summon the woman who had stood calm in a bank vault while $12 million became real. I summoned the 12-year-old girl who had knelt on hardwood floors, terrified of spilling scotch. I let my shoulders curve inward. I made my voice small. Dad, I whispered when he answered. I'm sorry I hung up. I didn't know what to say. A pause. You should be sorry, he said. But the edge was duller now. He was listening. I went to the bank, I continued, carefully uneven. The passbook. It wasn't empty. Dead silence. I could hear the math happening in his head. How much? He asked. Greed leaked into his voice like oil. 12 million, I choked. 12 million. But Dad, I don't know what to do. I let my breathing hitch. They were talking about capital gains taxes, audits, federal stuff. I think I'm in trouble. If the IRS finds out, they'll take half. I don't know how to hide it. I handed him exactly what he believed about me: weak, stupid, incapable of handling power. And exactly what he needed: a massive injection of liquidity. and cover for his own crimes. His voice transformed instantly, commanding, focused, almost gentle. "Listen to me," he said. "Don't sign anything with the bank. Don't talk to any lawyers. Bring the paperwork to me." I stayed quiet. "I can shelter it under the family trust," he continued. "Classify it as a pre-existing asset. It's complicated, but I can make the tax liability disappear. A beat. I'm doing this for you, sweetheart. To protect you." The real plan was obvious. Swallow my inheritance whole and use it to plug the holes in his sinking ship. "Can we do it tonight?" I asked, injecting urgency. "No," he said too quickly. "No. This needs proper handling." He needed time to prepare fake transfer papers, to build his own lie. Then he brightened. "Saturday," he said. "The Man of the Year Gala in Boston. Bring the documents there. We'll sign everything in the VIP suite before the speeches." Course. He wanted an audience. "I'll announce the expansion of the family fund," he added, excitement bleeding through. "It'll look legitimate." The glory mattered almost as much as the money. "Okay," I said softly. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for fixing this." "That's what fathers are for," he replied. The line went dead, the fear drained from my face instantly. I looked at Luke. "He took it," I said. Luke was already printing. The documents we'd actually present looked identical to what my father expected. Same font, same layout, same legal tone. But the fine print wasn't a transfer of funds. It was an affidavit of sole liability. Every crime, every misrepresentation, signed by his own hand. Richard Mercer thought he was reeling in a clueless daughter. He didn't realize he'd just invited the executioner to his own party Saturday night. 7:55 p.m. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza glittered like a monument to old power. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble. Senators, donors, legacy families. Boston's elite clustered in tailored confidence, speaking in low, assured tones. This was the room where reputations were minted and absolution was purchased with checks, and why father loved rooms like this. I didn't arrive in beige, I walked in wearing red. The dress was structured, sharp, unapologetic, cost more than my car and hugged my spine like armor. Red wasn't just a color. It was a warning. Power. Blood. I didn't slip around the edges of the crowd the way Richard preferred. I walked straight through it. Hunter was already at the bar, laughing too loudly, 3 drinks in. He didn't see me. He was still playing dolphin to a non-existent kingdom, basking in reflected glory. Richard stood near the front, flanked by 2 senators, glowing. He looked like a man who believed he'd pulled off the heist of the century. His smile never wavered when he saw me, but his eyes narrowed. He excused himself smoothly and met me near the stage steps, cameras flashing. "You're late," he said through clenched teeth, smiling for photographers. "Do you have it?" I held out the blue leather presentation folder. He snatched it from my hands. Greed was a physical force, vibrating off him like heat. "It's all there," he asked rapidly. "Transfer authorizations. Power of attorney." "Yes," I said evenly. "Just like you asked. It puts the entire $12 million under control of the family trust. You just need to sign as sole trustee to accept the assets." He flipped it open. He didn't read the clauses. He didn't check the definitions. A smarter man might have noticed the title. Affidavit of Historical Management and Sole Liability. Might have paused at the dates going back 20 years. Might have questioned the appendix linking every shell company he'd ever touched. But Richard wasn't smart. He was arrogant. He believed so completely in his dominance that the idea of me being a threat never crossed his mind. He pulled a Mont Blanc pen from his pocket. "You did the right thing, Alyssa," he said, scribbling his signature with a flourish. "Finally." He handed the folder back without looking at me, already turning toward the podium. "Go find a seat in the back," he added dismissively. "I have an announcement to make." He bounded up the steps. The room quieted. A spotlight found him. Applause rippled outward as he took the microphone. I didn't go to the back. I stepped to the side, lifted my phone, and photographed the signature page. Then I hit send. 3 miles away. Luke received it. He attached it to the whistleblower complaint we'd finalized days earlier. every transaction mapped, every shell exposed, and uploaded it to the Department of Justice secure portal on stage. My father smiled into the lights. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice rich with practiced humility. "Tonight we launch a historic expansion of the Mercer Family Foundation. A $12 million investment in this city's future." Applause swelled. What he was actually doing, right then in front of 500 witnesses, was confessing, claiming ownership of funds I just tied by his own signature to 20 years of tax fraud and offshore manipulation. He thought he was unveiling a legacy. He was reading his own Miranda rights. My phone buzzed. Received. IRS confirmation code 99 alpha. "It's done." Behind him, the 60-foot LED screen flickered. The foundation logo vanished, replaced by the Department of Justice seal. Bold red letters filled the room. Federal asset seizure in progress. Case #8842. The applause died mid-clap. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Richard turned slowly. Confusion crossed his face. Not fear. His mind rejected the reality that didn't match his script. That was his fatal flaw. Not ignorance. Entitlement. He had never believed someone he dismissed as insignificant could build a trap big enough to hold him. The ballroom doors burst open. 6 IRS Criminal Investigation Division agents swept down the aisle with practiced precision. "Richard Mercer," the lead agent called. "Step away from the podium." Richard clutched the microphone. "Do you know who I am?" "We do," the agent replied calmly. "You're the sole trustee who signed an affidavit accepting responsibility for 20 years of unreported offshore accounts." Richard spun toward me, eyes wild. "She tricked me. My daughter." "Save it for the grand jury," the agent said. The handcuffs snapped shut, cameras erupted. Phones were already recording. My father, once draped in power, was led away in a rented tux, stripped of grandeur, reduced to a man who finally understood the cost of arrogance. I stood still, the red dress didn't tremble. And for the first time in my life, the room watched him disappear. I thought it was over. It wasn't. The VIP suite door slammed behind us. The lock clicked. I turned just as Hunter stepped out from the shadows. He was sweating through his tux shirt, tie loose, face flushed an ugly purple. Gone was the barroom swagger. Gone was the laughter. What stood in front of me was panic, raw and feral. "You ruined everything," he hissed. I didn't raise my voice. "It was already ruined. The money never existed. Not the way you thought." That's when the illusion of family finally collapsed. Hunter's eyes flicked to the catering tray. His hand closed around a serrated steak knife. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't entitlement dressed up as confidence. This was pure instinct. The moment desperation shows its teeth, Luke stepped in front of me without hesitation. "Open the door, Hunter," he said evenly. Hunter lunged. Luke caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted, and there was a sharp, unmistakable snap. The knife skidded across the marble floor, spinning to a stop. Hunter collapsed, sobbing. Not from the pain, from the realization that there was nothing left. No power. No inheritance. No one coming to save him. When the agents forced the door open, that's how they found him. Curled inward, already irrelevant. 3 weeks later, I'm sitting on the porch of the Newport cottage. Salt air drifts in off the water. Fresh coffee warms my hands. The roof no longer leaks. The ivy is cleared. The place finally feels like what my grandfather intended. Home. Richard was denied bail. His assets are frozen. The empire he worshipped has been liquidated into evidence. Hunter took a plea deal. There's no inheritance waiting for him now. Only work. That I light a match and hold it to the corner of the affidavit. The paper curls, blackens, and disappears into ash. That I don't need it anymore. The IRS and DOJ have everything that matters. That page was just the fear I used to carry. Luke sits beside me. The trust transfer is complete, he says gently. It's all yours. What do you want to do with it? I look out at the ocean. $12 million, I say. Nothing. I let it grow. That I'm still a nurse. Still Alyssa. The money isn't power, it's protection. Protection from men who confuse control with love. Protection from ever needing to beg for safety again. Family isn't blood, it's who stands with you when the vault opens. Finally, thank you so much for watching. Please leave your feedback in the comments and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story.